Nobody from my family came to my husband's funeral, not even my parents nor my best friend. They all went to my niece's engagement party. Then the obituary revealed my husband's hidden legacy. I stood alone at my husband's funeral, completely alone. My parents chose my niece's engagement party over saying goodbye to the man I loved. My best friend sent a text, "Sorry, can't make it." Even my own siblings were too busy celebrating to mourn with me. But when the obituary hit the papers 3 days later, every single phone in my family started ringing off the hook. Because buried in those final paragraphs was a secret my husband had kept for 20 years, a secret that would change everything they thought they knew about the man they couldn't be bothered to honor. Hey, story lover! Welcome to the Narrative Hub, Reddit Stories. Believe me, this adventure gets wild, but it's only epic with you. Seriously, you make this possible. Want more stories? Greater adventure? Smash subscribe right now. Smash like. Comment below. Let's go. The funeral home felt like a mausoleum of broken promises. 27 empty chairs stared back at me, each one representing someone who should have been there. David's coworkers from the accounting firm filled maybe 6 seats. Mrs. Henderson from next door clutched tissues in the back row. That was it. I kept checking my phone, hoping for last-minute arrivals. Nothing. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft classical music David would have hated. He preferred jazz, something else my family never bothered to learn about him. "We're so sorry for your loss," whispered Janet from David's office. She'd worked with him for 15 years, knew his coffee order, remembered his birthday. She showed up. My own mother couldn't be bothered. The funeral director, a kind man named Mr. Peterson, approached with careful steps. "Mrs. Carter, would you like to delay the service? Perhaps some family members are running late." I almost laughed. Running late to a party across town where champagne bubbled and camera flashes captured perfect moments for social media. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Let's begin." 2 days earlier, I'd made the calls myself. Each rejection felt like a physical blow. "Nora, honey, you know how important this engagement is to Emma," my mother had said, her voice already distant. "David's not going anywhere. He'll understand." My sister Lisa was worse. "Look, I barely knew him. You guys kept to yourselves. This feels more like your thing than a family thing." Even Rachel, my best friend since college, had chosen the open bar over my grief. "I already RSVP'd yes to Emma's party. Can't we do something for David next week? Maybe a nice dinner." A nice dinner. For a dead man. The cruelest part wasn't their absence, it was how easily they justified it. How quickly 23 years of marriage became less important than cocktail shrimp and wedding planning chatter. At the graveside, the reality hit harder. David's simple casket, surrounded by a handful of work colleagues and exactly 0 family members, looked abandoned. The priest, Father Michael, had known David from our occasional church visits. He spoke beautifully about love, commitment, and the bonds that survived death. I wanted to scream that the bonds hadn't survived a competing social event. As dirt hit the casket, I made a silent promise to David. I would never forgive them. Not my parents, not my siblings, not Rachel. They'd made their choice. Now I'd live with mine. 3 days later, the phone calls begin. I was still in my bathrobe Wednesday morning when the first call came. My sister Lisa, breathless and urgent. "Nora, oh my God, have you seen the paper? Have you seen David's obituary?" I hadn't looked. The grief was still too raw, the betrayal too fresh. "What about it?" Just read it. Call me back." The line went dead. Before I could process her urgency, my phone rang again. My brother Mark, who hadn't spoken to me in months. "Nora, we need to talk. About David. About the obituary. This changes everything." "Everything? What could possibly change about my dead husband?" The calls kept coming. My parents, frantic. Rachel, apologetic but desperate. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years. all wanting to talk about David, all suddenly interested in the man they'd ignored for 2 decades. With shaking hands, I found the newspaper online. David's obituary filled half a page, unusual for the local paper. My eyes scanned the familiar details: beloved husband, accountant, quiet man who loved jazz and Sunday crosswords. Then I reached the final paragraphs, and my world tilted off its axis. Mr. Carter's philanthropic work, conducted anonymously for over 2 decades, touched countless lives in our community. Through his private foundation, established in 1995, he funded over 200 college scholarships, built 3 homeless shelters, and quietly paid medical bills for families in crisis. His foundation's assets, estimated at $15 million, will continue his mission through designated trustees. $15 million. My quiet, humble husband, who complained about spending $60 on dinner, had been secretly giving away a fortune. The man who drove a 15-year-old Honda and wore suits from discount stores had been one of the city's most significant benefactors. But the real shock came in the next paragraph. Among the scholarship recipients were several prominent local families, including full rides to Stanford University for Emma Martinez, 2018, Princeton for Mark Martinez, 2015, and Harvard for Lisa Martinez, 2012. Mr. Carter specifically requested these contributions remain anonymous, believing education should be pursued without the burden of obligation. Martinez. My maiden name. My siblings' children. David had paid for my nieces' and nephews' college educations. Every penny. While my family treated him like an unwelcome guest at holiday dinners, he was quietly ensuring their children's futures. I called the newspaper, demanding to speak with whoever wrote the obituary. "Ma'am, we didn't write this," the editor explained. "It came from Mr. Carter's attorney, along with instructions for publication and payment for a full-page spread in Sunday's edition. There's going to be more information released this weekend." A full-page spread. David had planned this revelation, orchestrated it from beyond the grave. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Carter, this is James Morrison from Morrison and Associates. I was your husband's attorney for his charitable work. We need to meet today, if possible." David left specific instructions. The attorney's office. James Morrison looked exactly like what central casting would order for: compassionate lawyer, gray hair, kind eyes, and a handshake that conveyed both sympathy and urgency. David was very specific about timing. He began, sliding a thick folder across his desk. He wanted you to discover his work only after his passing, and only after his obituary was published. He said you'd understand why once you read everything. The folder contained 20 years of records. Scholarship payments, medical bill assistance, disaster relief contributions, all anonymous, all substantial. But it wasn't just the money that stunned me. It was the recipients. My nephew's emergency appendectomy when he was 12? David paid the $40,000 bill when my brother's insurance lapsed. My niece's struggle with leukemia treatment? David covered the experimental therapy costs, nearly $200,000. My parents' mortgage when Dad lost his job in 2008? David bought the debt from the bank and forgave it entirely. Every family crisis, every financial emergency, every time my relatives had experienced an unexpected windfall or mysterious benefactor, it had been David. For 20 years, he'd been their guardian angel while they treated him like an inconvenience. The Sunday revelation. The full-page obituary hit like a bomb. David hadn't just documented his charitable work, he'd included photographs. Pictures of scholarship recipients at graduations, families moving into the homeless shelters he'd built, children whose medical treatments he'd funded. And there, prominently featured, were my family members at various celebrations and milestones, all made possible by the man they couldn't spare 2 hours to honor. The article included a quote David had prepared. I chose to help anonymously because love shouldn't come with conditions or expectations. I hoped that by removing the burden of gratitude, people could simply live their lives freely. My greatest joy was watching families thrive without knowing my involvement. But the final paragraph was addressed directly to me. To my beloved wife Nora, I kept this secret not from shame, but from love. Your family needed to choose to honor me for who I was to you, not for what I could give them. Their absence at my funeral tells us everything we need to know about authentic relationships. The foundation is yours now, along with all my love and the knowledge that you were the only person who ever loved me for myself alone. The phone calls became desperate. My mother, sobbing, trying to explain how they had no idea and would have made different choices if they'd known. My siblings, suddenly eager to reconnect, to properly honor David's memory. Rachel showed up at my door with flowers and apologies, claiming she'd always known David was special and had just gotten caught up in the moment. But Emma, my niece, the bride-to-be whose engagement had been so much more important than David's funeral, she surprised me most. She came alone, no flowers, no excuses. Aunt Nora, she said, standing on my doorstep with tears streaming down her face. I just found out David paid for my entire education. For years at Stanford, my master's program, even my study abroad semester. I thought it was a scholarship from some faceless corporation. I let her inside, made coffee, and listened as she continued. I treated him terribly. We all did. And he never said anything, never made us feel guilty, never held it over our heads. I don't know how to live with this. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than anger. James Morrison called that evening with more news. David left video messages, he said. One for you, and one that he wanted played only if your family reached out after the obituary. The video for my family was vintage David, gentle, understanding, but firm. If you're watching this, it means you've learned about my charitable work, and you're probably feeling confused, guilty, or both. Please don't. I helped because I could, and because I loved Nora, and by extension, I loved all of you. But I need you to understand something important. Nora stood alone at my funeral because you chose other priorities. That choice revealed the truth about our relationships. No amount of money changes that truth. If you want to honor my memory, honor Nora. Show her the love and respect you never showed me. That's all I ever wanted. The video for me was private, meant for a widow's eyes only. David, looking directly into the camera with those kind eyes I'd fallen in love with 30 years ago. My darling Nora, if you're watching this, it means you've discovered my little secret. I hope you're not angry about the deception. I wanted our marriage to be pure, built on love alone, not obligation or gratitude. You loved me when I was just a boring accountant who watched too much jazz documentaries and left my socks on the bedroom floor. That love was the most precious gift I ever received. The foundation is yours now, but so is a choice. You can continue my work, or you can sell everything and travel the world, or you can give it all away tomorrow. Whatever brings you peace. But please, don't let their betrayal at my funeral poison the rest of your life. You have so much living left to do. Oh, and Nora? The jazz collection in the basement? Those aren't just records. Check behind the Miles Davis albums. I left one more surprise. Behind the Miles Davis collection, I found a small safe I'd never noticed. Inside was a letter and a key. The letter was short. The cabin in Vermont isn't just a cabin. It's ours. Bought and paid for. The key is to the front door. Go there when you need peace. Go there when you need to remember that someone loved you completely. Go there and live. A cabin in Vermont. Of course. All those weekend work conferences he'd attended over the years. He'd been building us a retirement refuge, a place where we could grow old together, listening to jazz and watching seasons change through picture windows I was only now imagining. 6 months later. I did go to Vermont. The cabin was everything David would have chosen: simple, comfortable, surrounded by maple trees and mountain views. I spent the summer there, healing, thinking, and slowly learning how to carry on without him. My family tried to rebuild our relationship. Some efforts were genuine. Emma visited twice, helping me sort through David's papers and sharing stories about her Stanford experiences. Others felt performative, motivated more by guilt than authentic remorse. I decided forgiveness was a process, not an event. Some relationships could be repaired, others were forever changed. The foundation continues David's work. I kept his anonymity policy for most donations, but I did make one exception. Every scholarship now comes with a small note. This gift is given in memory of David Carter, who believed in the power of education and the beauty of quiet kindness. Rachel and I had lunch last month. It was awkward, stilted, full of careful words and unspoken regrets. She asked if we could go back to how things were before. I told her the truth. The woman who stood alone at that funeral isn't the same person you're having lunch with now. David's death changed me. Your absence changed me. We can build something new, but we can't go backward. She nodded, understanding more than I'd expected. I think about that day constantly. I think about what kind of person chooses champagne over showing up for a friend's grief. I don't like the answer. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was honest. And honesty, I'd learned, was worth more than convenient excuses. The legacy lives on. David's final surprise came a year after his death. James Morrison called with news that still makes me smile. Your husband set up a trust for you personally, he explained. Separate from the foundation. It matures on your first wedding anniversary after his death. He wanted to make sure you were financially secure for whatever life you choose to build. The amount was staggering, enough to ensure I'd never worry about money, never feel dependent on family who'd proven unreliable, never have to compromise my independence. But the real gift was the note that came with it, for my wife, who loved a boring accountant and made him feel like the richest man alive. Now go live richly, with or without them. I keep that note in my wallet now, next to our wedding photo. On days when the loneliness feels overwhelming, when the betrayal still stings, when I question my choices about forgiveness and family, I remember David's quiet wisdom. Love shouldn't come with conditions. Kindness doesn't require recognition. And sometimes, the most profound legacy isn't what someone leaves behind, it's how their life changes the way you choose to live yours. I stood alone at my husband's funeral, abandoned by people who should have known better. But I didn't stay alone. I found a strength I didn't know I possessed, a clarity about relationships I'd never had before, and a purpose that honors the man who loved me completely. David's hidden legacy wasn't just the money or the charitable work. It was the lesson that authentic love, the kind that shows up without conditions, that gives without expectation, that stands by you even when others walk away, that kind of love is the most valuable inheritance of all. And I plan to spend the rest of my life passing it on.